Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the next episode of Anti-Aging Unraveled. And I'm really excited to do this one today because honestly, we all need to think about basically what we're doing to fix ourselves. And this topic is what I do if I had to fix my health in 90 days. So forget everything, I ever basically learned, if you will. Maybe not everything I ever learned, but forget what everybody tells you. I think that if I lost my medical license tomorrow, if I had no access to fancy clinics, if I were starting from scratch with brain fog, stubborn belly fat, fatigue, inflammation, just complete hormone chaos, this is exactly what I would do in 90 days to rebuild my health from the inside out. So stay tuned for this whole podcast. I promise to make it relatively brief, but before the new year starts, I do have a promotion to get everybody started in this world of regeneration and fixing your body and fixing your health. And I want you to get started early because after the new year, honestly, guys, it gets so crazy. Everyone with their New Year's resolutions, things just get super busy. So I want to encourage you guys to think about this early. Sign up early. You don't have to start till January, but even getting that ball rolling and starting with one of our programs, we have tons of deals and really our best deals of the year to get you started before the holiday season. So this is all about what I would do to fix myself. And it's one of the most important I think I've ever recorded because I'm going to talk about the exact blueprint that I use for my own patients every single day. So this is for the woman who's doing all the right things or the man that's doing all the right things but can't lose weight. One that's waking up exhausted all the time or maybe can't get a restful night's sleep. The one whose labs are air quotes normal but feels absolutely awful. So this is not about willpower. This is about biology, about chemistry, about hormones, mitochondria, toxicity, and inflammation. And yes, I'm going to give you the exact framework that I would use to fix all of those things, or at least start that roadmap moving forward for the next 90 days. So, first thing I would do, obviously, after a very thorough history that I would give to my integrative medicine provider, i.e., myself, is I would test and not guess. So, here's what most people get wrong. They try detoxes, they try peptides, they try hormones, they try supplements, and they've never measured what's broken. And they use them in isolation, not together, not in the correct order, and actually not for the right duration, right? These things don't happen necessarily quickly or overnight. So changing them doesn't happen overnight either. So the order in which these things are done, as well as the duration and what you're stacking together, is really important because everything affects everything else in the body. So the first core functional labs that I use are basically pretty basic ones. I'll do all of your hormones like your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone, DHEA, binding globulin, cortisol, just to name a few, because menopause and andropause is really not a only hormonal problem. It's a brain, adrenal, ovary and testes, thyroid conversion. It's all of these things that come together to create one big problem. We're checking inflammation markers and autoimmune markers, SED rate, CRPs, cytokines, inflammatory markers, all these autoantibodies, these things that actually make our body misbehave. I always say there's three things that make us misbehave or make our body misbehave: food, toxic exposures, and pesticides, and heavy metals, and infection. So we're going to look for some of these things. We're going to look for toxins, mycotoxin panels, molds, heavy metals. We're going to look for chronic bugs, tick-borne illnesses, viral panels, mycoplasma, which is like a pneumonia. You can't calm down inflammation if there's a stealth infection driving it. Likewise, with these molds and heavy metals, you can't drain a bathtub while the faucet's still running, right? Because it's going to keep filling up. So as long as we have this limit to how much our body can actually do and achieve and accomplish, I call it a toxic threshold or a toxic load. When that sink is full, you can drain the sink, but it's going to keep refilling if you don't know the problem and stop it. So really big on some of these alternative testing. We do some bug panels. We can do some finger stick ones. Same thing with molds, heavy metals. toxic exposures and pesticides. I'm a real big believer in checking your toxic exposure load and knowing how well is your body able to reverse these damages. We could do genetics on these things. It's an oxidative stress panel. I love that panel to find out, can your body methylate? Can it detoxify? How's your glutathione pathways, which we're going to talk about? Are they functional? Do we need to work on them? Going and taking a supplement and not knowing if you need it or what it's going to do for you really doesn't help you. Let's talk about the gut and liver. They're big testing panels that I love. Again, it goes back to food being one of those big precursors. Get a food sensitivity test. I love getting detox enzymes. Again, those gene SNPs telling how well we can detoxify. What is the glutathione being able to do? What's our oxidative capability to reverse damage? Dysbiosis and leaky gut testing, SIBO testing. Is our gut working at all? If you don't address that gut, again, that sink never gets cleared out, and we constantly are having problems with re-exposure. So this tells me why weight won't move, why brain fog exists, why you can't function mentally speaking. How is estrogen recycling off? Why is estrogen dominance a problem? And why the inflammation won't shut off. Is it a bug? Is it food? Is it toxic exposures? Without this information, we're really kind of dead in the water. Okay, that's step one. Step two, now that we know what's causing the problem, we need to open the drains, right? Detox first, and then we got to stop the exposures. But if we don't detox, we're never going to get the stuff out of your system. You can't heal what you can't eliminate. So before hormones, before peptides, before weight loss, be sure we're opening those drainage pathways. I would immediately support 2 phases of my liver. Phase 1 is kind of the phase where you're getting it out of the fat and out of the cells and into the bloodstream. Okay, we use like a cytochrome P450 pathway. Basically, we're pulling it out. Phase 2 is excreting it. That's what most people think about. Glutathione, methylation, sulfation, all these words, people using NAC, and they're all basically helping phase 2 detoxification. But the first thing you need to do is clean up your diet, low residue foods, try to get rid of some of the gluten and dairy, at least to kind of take the load down. I love a good liver detox, which has those 2 things in one kit, food avoidance and clean eating for a few weeks. I do it every year. I love it. Getting on some NAC, getting on some glycine, getting on some glutathione or other liposomal precursors, helping with the B vitamins and methylation. Again, how do we get this out of our body once we pull it out of the cells in the bloodstream? If it sits around, it's going to make us feel sick for a while until our body is capable of getting rid of it. Magnesium, another good way to help getting things, get those toxins out of your system. I love binders. Binders are, think about the old movies with charcoal, activated charcoal when there's a poisoning. Charcoal and other things actually help to bind up the heavy metals and get rid of them. So when molds or heavy metals or even estrogen dominant is a problem, we can stop that by actually taking some binding agents. They're usually taken on an empty stomach, away from supplements if possible. And usually we have certain toxins that can be detoxed with different binding agents. So I do change up my protocols depending on what's in the system. But obviously, if you do the testing, you know what's in your system, and we know the best ways to try to avoid that in the future. For example, pesticides or plastics or different mold exposures. If we can get that out of our system, and then we're not filling up the sink as quickly, and then we can detox it and pull it out. One of my favorite steps that I would add on to this is ozone therapy. And ozone therapy increases oxygen delivery. So think about it, oxygen plus ozone, and it's a great way to basically get the tissues more oxygen to help with repair and recovery, but it's antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal, breaks down biofilms. It's fabulous. So it's going to actually be antibiotic as well as anti-inflammatory and help the oxygenation of those tissues. So it's going to decrease that what we call oxidative burden, which helps your body to actually get rid of those toxic exposures, helps the immune system, helps the mitochondria. This is probably one of the biggest things, and helps with autoimmunity. When we start to give ozone to the body, our immune system actually gets stronger, and some of these autoimmune phenomena start to shut down for two reasons. One, you're helping with the oxidative damage to get reversed, but two, you're killing off the bugs that oftentimes set off some of this autoimmune response. All right. So I love ozone therapy. We have a whole podcast on ozone. You can you can listen to that, but we have actually like four different types of ozone that we can talk to you about. And all of them involve getting ozone into the bloodstream in one way or another. Sometimes we can even do it in the ears. We can even do it for the colon. There's so many different ways to do ozone. And it's been used in Europe for decades for chronic infection, inflammation, and detox. So it's not a fad. This isn't something that just, came upon us this year. Yes, I just brought it into my practice this year, but it's been around for a very, very long time. All right. So now we get to what most of you know, phase 3. And phase 3 is that hormonal reset. Okay. Perimenopause and andropause isn't just getting older. It's the brain, for example, in women, the brain becomes misfired. It starts misfiring due to hormone depletion of progesterone and poor GABA stimulation. And then we get the metabolic downslide from that, insulin resistance and cortisol dysregulation, and then thyroid suppression. And similar things happen in men as well with the testosterone decline. So I want you to understand that these are all related systems. And just because we're putting back the hormones doesn't mean we don't have to touch the other systems that it has affected. So progesterone is for sleep, for anxiety, for estrogen balance, for brain protection, neuroprotection. Estradiol, when indicated, and it has a much better rap as of a couple weeks ago. You listen to that podcast on estrogen replacement, skin, brain, bone density, and belly fat regulation. Testosterone, huge for women and for men. Men have about 1/10 women have about 1/10 men do, but it's for motivation and that mojo, leaning out, libido, orgasm, confidence, metabolic rate, insulin resistance, and getting rid of that belly fat. And then also the adrenals before the thyroid. If we don't fix the adrenal glands, that cortisol stress response, or don't treat it with a supplement, putting back thyroid won't work. All right. It pushes the thyroid into a burnout state and causes crashes. So if we don't address the cortisol, we really won't get tangible results on the thyroid side. So we really need to make sure we treat it. And the biggest symptom that people have from that is extreme fatigue and weight gain and sleeplessness. So we need to stop the hot flashes. We can stop the sleep with it. We can improve sleep within weeks, especially with hormone replacement. We can turn off night sweats with testosterone specifically and restore mental and brain clarity with progesterone and testosterone. So that's just to name a few. The benefits of the hormone replacement therapy protocols are innumerable. The benefits far outweigh any risks, and I think we're finally starting to realize that in even traditional medicine. So that is my step 3. Now, that brings us to about 6 to 8 weeks. All right. Now, this is what I usually do with my patients, and anyone that's a patient, you can probably attest to this. I don't usually throw peptide stacks on right away. Why? Because you can throw peptides on early and just go buy a random peptide. But unless the environment or the milieu isn't right, they're not going to work. They're just going to be very expensive, watered down light switches that aren't going to turn or signal anything on and off appropriately because the rest of the signaling pathway is not set. We need to set the stage. So weeks 4, maybe 6 to 10 or 12 is when I start to add in peptides. And I actually lean more towards the 8 to 10 week mark because now we're on hormones. Now our liver's detoxed. Now our gut's been addressed. We have the testing. We know what's going on. We know your oxidative threshold and capability. And now we can put back on some peptides. And peptides are innumerable. There are so many. But if we're talking about myself, and we're talking about belly fat loss, and we're talking about my brain clarity and inflammation reduction and mitochondrial repair and what I would consider longevity stacking, Number one, AOD 9604 for targeted fat loss. Targets stubborn fat loss, doesn't burn muscle, doesn't affect blood sugar. So, not like a GLP-1, guys. And it's safe for perimenopausal women, no problem. I would pair that with something for the brain. Cmax or Celank. One is a little bit more for focus, which is more the Cmax. Celank is a little bit more for anxiety driven or maybe overactivity of the brain. They increase your brain derived neurotrophic factor, improves brain clarity and focus, calms anxiety, and supports memory and executive function. So for me, I'd probably choose Cmax for the focus portion of it and supporting that memory and executive function. So this is a peptide that I feel like many women, when they start it, they just feel like them again. Same thing with men. Testosterone and Cmax or Celank and progesterone and testosterone with Cmax or Celank for women puts that brain space back in check, and you feel like a normal human, like you feel like yourself again. BPC 157. All right, we're going to repair my gut. We're going to get rid of the leaky gut. We're going to get rid of some of the inflammatory problems, decrease the cytokines and the inflammation, and help with my autoimmunity. You cannot heal or fix hormones or fix thyroid if you don't fix the cortisol and the gut. So adrenals and gut are huge. And then for me, for longevity and mitochondrial repair, I would do MOTS-c. MOTS-c is one of the most powerful peptides, I feel like. Improves insulin sensitivity, increases cellular ATP, so your energy, do that with ozone, and man, are you in a good place. Improves endurance, so for your workouts. Decreases inflammation and aging signals, so all those signals that tell us to get older, it actually starts to decrease and improves that oxidation of fat. So these I 100% would do a couple times a year. And I would start with fixing your energy at the cellular level here before even jumping to some of these NADs and NAD drips. Okay. Because we really need a mitochondrial reset before NAD can work. So even our NAD under the tongue or sublingual, I wouldn't necessarily jump to that initially unless we've been working on now, it doesn't have to be with a peptide. We can work on mitochondrial reset other ways, but I do think you should work on mitochondrial reset before you start putting back some of these other kind of cellular energy products like an NAD. Okay. Last one I would do is probably epitalon. Epitalon is more of like a generalized longevity peptide. It stops that DNA from aging. So it actually stops the telomeres from getting shorter, which in English means it makes our DNA stay longer, stay healthier for a larger period of time. This is how we fix the energy at a cellular level. And, I think for me, an add-on, people ask, like, if you were going to add on a couple more peptides, I would add on NAD. I would add on thymosin alpha 1 because my immune system particularly is not great. And I have a lot of autoimmune disease. So I'd add on that thymosin alpha to reset my thymus gland and get my immune system to work more optimally. And then I'd probably throw on some PT141 for enhancing libido. That's just, if the progesterone and testosterone aren't doing the trick, PT141 or oxytocin do a really nice job to help get that last little bit of brain kind of calming. They don't work on hormones per se. They work on the brain center for the brain libido connection. All right. Now, obviously, when we start doing all this, and I alluded to this in the beginning, you want to start and make sure you're getting that nutritional reset from the very beginning. Almost 80% of our toxic exposures on a regular basis are food, whether it's toxins in the food, whether it's just the foods that we're eating we're sensitive to, high sugars. So no ultra processed foods, stable blood sugar, so low glycemic diets, protein with every meal and getting that high protein, especially for women. Fiber to enhance estrogen clearance is really important. It's remember, it's a binding agent, so it's going to help on the gut and it's going to help with hormone recycling. And I actually, in menopause, find that intermittent fasting does not work as well as it does back up. Intermittent fasting does not work as well in perimenopause as it does younger and older because the hormones are fluctuating. So it almost shifts you into kind of an adrenal cortisol dysfunction. So no prolonged fasting. We like small, frequent meals. If you're going to fast, it shouldn't be any longer than until 12 for lunch from like 7 o'clock the night before. And all of your carbs that you eat, I don't like more than 5 to 10 grams of carbs per serving, but it should all revolve around taking that with a protein or a fat. All right. And they should be strategic. More carbs in the morning, less carbs at night. We want to mimic that cortisol curve. We want that cortisol to go up in the morning and come down as the day goes on. So we want to make sure we have hormone smart nutrition, detoxifying, low glycemic load nutrition. Okay. So low residue foods, not a lot of pesticides, not a lot of things that have to be broken down strategically. We want to give your body as little work as possible. Okay. And that should be throughout the entire course. And then let's talk about how realistic this timeline is. 90 days, I think, is realistic to get a good start. The first 1 to 14 days, we're going to get the testing. We're going to start draining the liver. We're going to eat healthier. We're going to bind up our toxin. And we probably should start getting on some ozone. Okay. Days 15 to 45, so your first month and a half-ish, that's when we really need to get those hormones on board. After we've started to clean that liver out, after we've started eating cleaner, we're going to get those hormones on. We'll get the gut repair underway and our sleep better. Maybe even add those peptides on at the end. I like to push those probably out a little bit further to about 45 to 60. Maybe even 3 months at the very end. But I think doing it halfway through your 90-day protocol is reasonable. Mitochondrial signaling from those peptides. We're going to get fat loss activation. That fat finally starts to melt away. That brain clarity starts to lock in. That peptide for cell anchor, CMAX, starts to work. Your inflammatory markers start to drop. Your libido comes back. Your sleep patterns are more regular. Your confidence and your mojo gets better. And everything starts to fall into place. The longest part of this is that detoxification pathway, killing off the bugs. Why? Because they take a long time to draw out of the system. And bugs, unfortunately, are always being re-exposed to us 24/7. And unless you live in a bubble, this is happening all the time. So my opinion is you usually should treat the bug as long as you've been feeling lousy. If that's 2 years, it might take 2 years. Doesn't mean antibiotics for 2 years. It just means that we're doing herbal things to actually clean up the system and keep the bug suppressed. Maybe that's ivermectin. Maybe that's methylene blue. Okay. There's lots of things that we have at our disposal these days to help get rid of some of these chronic bugs. Okay. Okay. Maybe it's rapamycin. Rapamycin is another one. So why do most people fail at reset programs? This isn't, I wouldn't say it's important to make sure that it's done in this order. And it's really important to make sure that you stack your hormones and your peptides appropriately. Like if we're going to do a weight loss peptide, then we really should be working on growth hormone and leaning out and testosterone and progesterone at the same time. Otherwise, it doesn't work as well. So I really think that that's very important. But they fail because they skip the testing. They fail because they go crazy with a massive detox kit and they do it really aggressively, or it's not maintainable, and either they feel sick or they don't finish it out, or they just go back to eating the same way they were before. Okay? Too hard, too fast. The gas pedal is just going, going, going. Or they add the hormones before starting the drainage pathways. We want to make sure the estrogen is recycling. We want to make sure that testosterone doesn't build up. We want to make sure that your progesterone is getting to the brain and that your cortisol and your thyroid is in check. Before, we want to do all of those things before adding these hormones on. Adding peptides without fixing your toxic load. If you don't clean out the system, if you don't get rid of the bugs, if you don't bring that toxic load, the environmental pesticides, if you don't bring that down before putting the peptides on board, you're going to be turning on light switches that don't work. okay? Because they are signaling molecules. They're not replacing anything. They're not putting anything back like hormones do. So you're going to spend a lot of money on peptides that aren't functional because your pathways aren't ready for them. So there's a very specific order with which this should be done. And peptides, if you have a chronic infection, peptides aren't going to work. Not well anyway, not until you start to treat the chronic infection. If you have mold exposure, that chronic repeated mold exposure, what do you think is going to happen if we don't treat that and put you on thymosin alpha? That thymosin alpha is not going to be able to keep up with the demand. It's not going to have even an appropriate light switch or a nudge to turn on. They're following internet protocols that aren't based on labs, or they're getting their information and their peptides and their supplements not from a primary doctor, not from someone who's certified in this field. And what I would tell you is while it might be available to you temporarily, that's the FDA is soon shutting this down. They're actually enforcing that peptides and oral peptides are prescriptives. They are not to be purchased without having a provider prescription essentially on in a program. And they probably should be prescriptions. I don't disagree with that. I just don't agree with taking them off the market and putting things out there that say they're not safe without having the proof that they're not safe. But I would say that not having protocols and not having someone monitoring your labs and checking numbers and beforehand is dangerous, and you're doing yourself a disservice. Even if it's cheaper, you're still doing yourself a disservice because no one's monitoring you or helping you do this. So it's not usually a motivation problem. It's a sequence problem. It's a grouping problem. So my final message to you on this, and this is, again, how I'd fix myself. We can go into different patient cases and things like that, but you don't necessarily need 2 years, and you don't always need 20 or 30 supplements. You don't need willpower. Yes, you need to be able to want to start something, but it really doesn't take a lot of willpower other than the dietary part of it. You need the right testing, you need the right order, you need the right medical support, and your body needs the right signaling. And that's really the key. We need to get your body in a place where those signals are in a good spot so you can turn on all the circuits with these peptides. And that's exactly what we do at Dr. Lori is we're helping you put these in order and getting you protocols. I'm meeting with you every 3 months minimally. If you're really good at 6 months or longer. And in our longevity ecosystem, our goal is to go through everything step by step by step with you and make sure that you're starting things appropriately, you're starting things in the right order, and that we're grouping them, so that they work. I don't want you spending your money on things that don't work. So if today's episode hit home, if you're tired of guessing and you want tests, if you're ready to actually understand what your body needs, then here's your next step. You want to complete your intake on our website. There's a female and a male intake on mydrlori.com. And if you want, you can put 90-day reset right in the notes that you heard this podcast. That would be fabulous. Or you can literally just go to the VIP section, the early VIP section in our website. There is a drop down on our main bar. And there's also a little link at the top of our page. Put your email in there and we'll get you all the information to get started and actually get into our, what I would consider our pre-New Year's early access VIP section where you actually get a free month to start of our fees. For peptides, you get a free 3 months of our fees to start. For our weight loss, it's 1 month as well. You get discounts on your peptides and your hormones for your startup. We get you basically labs to start up. Especially if you don't have insurance, we'll get you a kit to start up, or if you don't have good coverage. I know it's the end of the year. A lot of you have met your deductibles. We can work with that as well. And you get your peptide mapping. You get to meet with us regularly. You get all of your longevity and hormone planning, obviously your detox support and everything else. So this is something that I encourage you guys to get started with early before the new year. Because like I said, once the new year starts, it gets a little bit crazy. And then it's a little bit of a longer wait to get started. And then you won't have access to all of these great free promotions. We also have a free webinar that's a $25 value that you get access to for free if you put yourself in that VIP section. So, just to finish up, guys, I think, listen, your body isn't broken, it's aging. We know this. It's communicating. I promise you, it will communicate to each other or different parts if we start working on the signaling pathways and get rid of the junk. Not, we have to put some things back like hormones, right? And maybe some supplements, but it can change faster than you think it can when we actually listen correctly and do things in the right order. So, on that note, I hope you enjoyed this podcast, guys. It's our first one of our new series for anti-aging unraveled, and I'm doing basically a how to fix your health series. This one's what I had to do if I had to fix my health in 90 days. So stay tuned for our next one. We're trying to put them out every week, and of course go to mydrlori.com and fill out your intake today. Follow us on YouTube at anti-aging, what is it actually? Oh, Anti-Aging Unraveled by Lori Gerber on any podcast platform. You can also find me by a podcast by that same name. Thanks, everyone.